Hey, yo, I want to talk about Alchemy, and how to fix it so that its digitally exclusive cards are playable in paper. This is the first in a series I plan to do fixing each mechanic one at a time, so if you've clicked this or I've sent you here from another video, then your first question might be, why would anyone even want to make Alchemy cards playable in paper in the first place? Or, what do you mean by fix? And I think it's important to spend the first half of this video answering those questions before we get into the mechanics, so you can understand my reason behind and in what spirit I'm suggesting these fixes to the cards. However, up front, the first thing you need to know is that I don't play Alchemy. I've never played Alchemy, I don't even play Arena, and I have no plans to play either in the future, though that may change. All of which means I have no first-hand experience with any of these cards or mechanics. So what do I know? Can I really confidently say these fixes to cards I don't even play are possible? Yes I can. How? Well, you're just gonna have to watch the video and find out. Which leads us nicely to our first question. Why would I even want this to begin with? I actually have many reasons that all kind of blend together and have been formed from opinions I've stated in many of my other videos. So I'm not going to try to go too deep here, I'm just going to bullet point it so as not to repeat things I've said elsewhere and waste your time. First, Magic is a collectible card game. I've had a bunch of people in the comments make this point whenever I talk about how dumb I think it is to have serialized cards or a million different art treatments and frames. Because the secondary market is real, and being able to collect all the different versions of cards is apparently important and something that people want. Of course you don't ever hear those types complain about the non-collectability of digitally exclusive cards though, do you? But, in all seriousness though, they do have a point. Resellers and investors do exist and are a part of Magic's ecosystem. And they're not the only ones who want to own physical cards, because there's big binder collectors like me who don't even care about the secondary market but just want to own the cards because they love them. But you can't do that if they don't exist. Second, I want to play with these cards. Sometimes due to mechanics, but mostly just for the art and for the flavour. I've made a stink in the past about how Davriel Kane and Gutmorn are two of my most desired characters to see in cardboard, because I'd love to build an Innistrad Demons deck that features them. But I can't, because Alchemy's hoovered up a bunch of fan favourite characters, meaning now that they're technically represented, the chance of them getting physical versions is vastly reduced. And yes, I do care about that. Just because Universes Beyond may be making enough money that WotC have given up on their own characters and lore, doesn't mean that there aren't those of us that are still invested in Magic's IP. And seeing digital cards featuring that IP wouldn't be an issue, if these cards were available in paper. However, they aren't. But you may wonder, if I care that much, can't I just build a deck using these characters on Arena? Well no, because fuck Arena. I don't want to play it. I don't like that WotC are withholding these cards to tempt people into signing up to a seemingly predatory client where they get to use all the manipulative mobile phone FOMO tactics of battle passes and weird currency to squeeze as much money from you as possible. It's their client, and as I understand, there's no picking up dirt cheap secondhand cards, there's no card trading, there's not even any real fucking cards in the first place, because it's all just code. So if they want to nerf something into unplayability or delete it outright, then you've spent your money but you're left with nothing. Because, from what I understand, their refund policy also sucks. Which, of course it does. Arena's only purpose is to cut out middlemen like game stores and even printing factories and delivery companies, then control or abolish the secondary market in an attempt to extract as much money as possible from you exclusively for themselves. And Hasbro. And even then, that's only while it's still profitable for them to keep the servers online. Which I guarantee won't be forever, meaning a physical collection is the only long-term means of preserving and playing this game. So yeah, fuck Arena. Its digital nature restricts us on which cards we can play with and how, and we shouldn't have to use it to play with any Magic cards if we don't want, because Magic is a paper game, so every card should exist in paper for us to then play with how we like, at our discretion, because that's what we paid for. Also, separate point, I dislike the segregation between the communities that I've noticed developing between Arena and paper players. These groups seem to have two very different experiences with the game, and I think the gathering part of Magic the Gathering is quite important. I really feel we should be one community, regardless of what format or client we play. Like, I understand that some people's only option is a digital client like Arena, but that's my point. It's weird to me that those people will have a different experience from the rest of the player base, solely due to Arena being their only option. I feel Arena should be as close a replica to a paper experience as possible, including trading and selling off your cards. And these digital exclusive Alchemy cards, which I don't think you can opt out of playing with and are apparently legal in a lot of formats on there, while not being the only issue, do make that divide feel wider. It's like Magic classism, and I don't like it. My last two bullet points here cover two issues I have with the same problem. The first I'm going to label as Arena First Complexity Creep. And what I mean by that is, having listened to WotC when they speak, it's become apparent to me that their design philosophy seems to revolve primarily around Arena and then paper afterwards. They've openly said that the Arena team gets final say over card design, and that certain paper cards and mechanics are changed before release so that they are better able to work on Arena. And looking at their financial statements, it's easy to understand why Hasbro would pull focus away from paper Magic and towards Arena, because digital just makes them so much money. However, this approach to the game has several knock-on effects and issues, but the ones I think are applicable to us here are, as I mentioned, complexity creep. Arena is a digital client, meaning it does all the thinking, so you don't have to remember your triggers or what keywords or a mechanic does, or even really understand things like turn phases, the stack, or how many cards you can have in your hand, because Arena will do that for you. Alchemy has digital cards that take advantage of that fact. So, if you're WotC and you can design cards without the concern of whether players will understand how it works or not, you can do some wild stuff that you would normally never be able to do in paper. Things that would seem fine if that's where it ended, but I look at the state of modern card design. How creatures can't just do one thing but have to have ward or a bunch of other mechanics. How rules text is getting so long we're having to chop words off. Prime example being enters the battlefield now shortened to just enters. And I have to wonder, why is that? I suspect for a lot of reasons, and I'm certainly not suggesting it's entirely due to Alchemy cards, but I do believe this attitude of Arena first is part of a change in design philosophy. One that means that WotC's focus is on designing cards for Arena compatibility before paper, leading to complexity creep. In essence, because Arena does the heavy lifting, it means players don't have to, which means players can endure more complex designs on Arena. So sure, stick ward on everything and let the computer figure it out. The consequences of what that does to paper seemingly an afterthought. I believe if WotC were forced to make all cards playable within the restrictions of paper again, they'd have to reevaluate their design choices. And while it wouldn't be the only thing we'd need to change, I do think eventually we'd start to see a slowdown in complexity creep as a result. The second issue I have with this design philosophy I'll list as Arena first normalizing errata, because the issue doesn't stop at complexity creep. WotC's overall treatment of the game has changed in the last decade. Now, you can point the finger for cards like Oko at the old Fire design, but honestly, things don't seem much better now. Look at Nadu and what that's done to multiple formats. And it doesn't stop at WotC's willingness to print busted, overpowered cards. We've seen multiple needs for erratas due to missing text, errors, and do not even get me goddamn started on all these type changes. And I think all of this is due to WotC getting comfortable with Alchemy designs. Alchemy as a format puts the fact it will rebalance cards front and foremost as if that's a good thing for the game. Got a broken card? Don't worry about it, nerf it, fuck the people that have just paid real money for it. Decided you don't like this creature type anymore? Forget all the existing cards for it and their history, bin it off, physical collectors be damned. Does this card have a mistake? Whoopsie, just change it, because Arena can be updated just like that. And I'm sure people playing in paper will have no issue with their physical card game requiring an always online connection to the internet so they can just stop and Google each and every card every time one's played. Reading the cards doesn't have to explain the cards because who knows what will change next or why. Now, obviously I'm being sarcastic, but you may be wondering, is it really fair of me to complain about erratas and bannings? Magic is a complicated game. Should WotC really be expected to get it perfect first time? Yes, they should. They should get it right first time. And yes, it is fair to complain when they don't. Do you have any idea how much money they make? They have no excuse for selling us subpar physical products and then trying to change them later like Magic is a fucking video game that needs patch updates. Because they can't be changed. The hounds I bought are always going to say hounds on them, regardless of who says they're a fucking dog now. So again, I think if WotC were forced to print these Alchemy cards in paper, they'd have to reconsider this approach of fixing everything in post. We as players shouldn't have to memorize every constantly changing card, or be forced to look them up instead of reading the card text just because WotC are too cheap to hire enough developers or QA people, or too greedy to playtest a set properly before putting it out and starting on the next one. They make enough money, they certainly charge high enough prices, they should get it right first time. So yeah, that's my list of reasons why I want Alchemy cards to be playable in paper. Like I say, I could go on, but this has already taken long enough and I didn't want to get too deep here for time, so I hope these bullet points get my opinions across, even if I didn't fully explain my reasoning. If you want to see the origins and, more importantly, evidence for why I have these opinions, then I kind of do that a little bit across all of my videos. This list is just an amalgamation of all of my thoughts that are relevant to why I want paper versions of Alchemy cards laid out in one place for this series. If you are interested in hearing more, then this video is a good starting point because I go a bit more in depth about why I don't play Arena in the first place. But even that's not definitive. For instance, it's in this video on Modern Horizons 3 where I go into the whole Arena team dictating card design for paper. My thoughts are spread out across the whole channel. And if you want to support my channel, please like and subscribe. You may have noticed I'm very sweary, however, and YouTube doesn't seem to like that, so if you really want to support me, please check out my Patreon. I have many tiers and many different price points that offer a bunch of fun rewards. One of them being the Lunar tier at only £1, which I think is $1.50 US. For your contribution, you'll get your name credited on screen at the end of my videos and a text scroll exclusive to the members of that tier. Your name won't be huge, but it will be there. The catch for that low cost is that I'm limiting membership to only 1,000 people. So if you want to see your name in my videos, you want to support me to keep creating said videos, and £1 or $1.50 doesn't break the bank, then come join me on the Moonbase and sign up to my Patreon, link in the description below. Now, what do I mean by fix? And don't worry, this will be the last point before I get to fixing Conjure. I've said before that I believe 100% of Alchemy cards could be playable in paper, and I stand by that. But, do I mean they'll function exactly the same as they do on Arena? No, obviously not. There's no digital client working out the back end, the players will need to do that bit for themselves. Will making cards like these playable in paper lead to super fun gameplay? Maybe not. Will these create issues and extra complications that take time away from gameplay? Perhaps. But I still think it should be done for all the reasons I listed earlier. And also, I'm following WotC's example, because they clearly don't mind stealing focus away from gameplay with extra complications if they expect us to Google every card just to make sure it still does what it says it does. And, when it comes to rules changes, WotC aren't afraid to take existing cards like Ardent Angel or Oubliette that are either digital exclusive or use mechanics that just don't function in the current rules, and then change their mechanical functionality. So that, yeah, they aren't the exact same card anymore, they don't work the same way they used to, and yes, that will have knock-on effects with other cards. Like how Ardent Angel will now trigger cards that care about dice rolling, when it didn't used to. And Oubliette will now trigger cards that care about phasing, when it didn't used to. It's not important to WotC that the cards are a one-to-one replication of how they used to work, but instead the intended spirit of their functionality is kept the same, even if the actual functionality isn't. So with all that being said, let's fix Conjure. A designed-for-digital, arena-specific keyword first seen in Jumpstart Historic Horizons, which, unless I'm mistaken, was the first time we saw any of these arena-exclusive keywords. And while not technically from an Alchemy set, I'm still counting it as it's a keyword that makes use of the digital nature of the client in a way that couldn't be replicated in paper. Or so they say. Also, I picked Conjure as the first one as I believe it'll be really quick and easy to fix in a way that I believe won't be controversial, everyone will be happy with, and it's one that people will have a hard time disagreeing with me over when I say it's more than possible in paper. I knew that as this was the first video in my Fixing Alchemy series, I should start with the why and how I plan on fixing these cards to begin with, and that would take up like 80% of the runtime, so being the easiest one, I thought Conjure is where we should start. Let's look at Winged Steed Trainer as a clean example as to what Conjure does. When Winged Steed Trainer enters the battlefield or attacks, conjure a card named Stormfront Pegasus into your hand. And Stormfront Pegasus is a pre-existing card that's a 2-mana 2/1 with flying. So, easy as that. When it enters or attacks, you get a Pegasus you can cast like any other card into your hand that's appeared from thin air. Okay, let's compare. Are there any existing cards in paper which similarly create other magic cards out of thin air, without first having to get them from somewhere like your deck or a sideboard? Yes, loads in fact. Llanowar Mentor creates the iconic Llanowar Elves. Mogul Roxanne creates a Meteorite. The recent Dissa the Restless creates a Tarmogoyf. And the silver-bordered, so I forgive the pun name, Crowstorm creates a Stormcrow. However, I'd say old Garth One-Eye has to be the most famous of all of these because if you read the rules text, it creates some absolutely wild cards, which includes Black Lotus. So what's the difference between those and Winged Steed Trainer? Well, if we compare the card that it conjures, Stormfront Pegasus, to the others like Llanowar Elves, Meteorite, Tarmogoyf, and Stormcrow, you'll notice unlike the Pegasus, they're all tokens, not actual cards. Even your boy Garth with his Black Lotus says, create a copy of the card with the chosen name, you may cast the copy, and nothing about putting it into your hand like with the Pegasus, because it's a token copy, and it can't go into your hand as once a token leaves the battlefield it ceases to exist. If that Llanowar Elves gets killed, it doesn't go to the graveyard, because it's a token, it can only exist on the battlefield. And that's how it works in paper, right? Well, most of the time, yeah. But not always. Let me introduce you to Claire de Lune, named for the song that stranger was playing on the piano in the hospital foyer the last time I got to see my grandmother. And it reads, when Claire de Lune, Joy Sculptor, enters, for the rest of the game, tokens you own become cards that are still tokens. They continue to exist after they leave the battlefield. And while if we look at Scryfall you may notice she's not legal in any format, if we scroll down a bit you'll see there's already a bunch of rules written into the game which explain perfectly how tokens can exist outside of the battlefield. My favourite of which being the last one which says, tokens need to be indistinguishable from the other cards in that zone. And If the token is represented by another object, such as a body part, a phone, a cat, some food, or a toy, use a magic card, preferably a token as a stand-in. So okay, if that Llanowar Elves gets killed, there is a scenario in which that token could go into a graveyard. In fact, putting a token there would apparently be preferable to a cat. So there are existing cards in paper which can create other cards which could go into your hand, just like we see with the Wingsteed Trainer. And if you're still not convinced, and you're thinking, well, didn't I establish earlier that this Pegasus isn't a token, so how does any of this help, what am I suggesting? Well, you're right, these conjured cards aren't tokens, they're just normal cards. It's actually easier to integrate them into the game. But if we are going to introduce a new rule to clarify a distinction between these conjured cards and non-conjured cards, here's what I'd recommend as a fix. We introduce a new rule and copy and paste the majority of the explainer text from Clair de Lune, and we just label all conjured cards as something new. Instead of tokens, they're brokens. No, that's dumb. Copies? No, that would get confusing. Emblems is already a thing. Hey, Scarlet, what's another word for tokens? No, I did that one already. Ooh, powerful word, yeah, alright, whatever. So we just introduce a rule that says something like, all cards created via the conjure mechanic are considered to be vestiges in addition to their other types. And then we just insert the Clair de Lune rules, swapping out the word token for the word vestige, and the word cat for the word bobcat. And we're done. You wouldn't even need to visually distinguish which cards are vestiges or not, because they're just like any other card now, created in exactly the same way that tokens are, but with the stick around rules built in. And obviously there are other cards like Tome of the Infinite that can use the conjure mechanic in a way that would still mean it couldn't be printed into paper yet, but that's not because of the conjure mechanic and due to another aspect of the card instead, this instance being the randomness. But that'll be for another video in the series. So what do you think? Have I fixed it? Does this make conjure cards playable in paper? Or are there other differences between cards like Wingsteed Trainer and Garth that I missed? Let me know in the comments below. And before you type anything like, not all alchemy cards will work in paper, what about this mechanic? Chill, this was episode 1, I'll get to it eventually, if I can be bothered. Thank you very much for watching this video, and thank you to everyone that supports me, like James Diamond, Eggboy the Particle that permeates all existence, and the rest of my patrons whose names are on screen now. I'd also like to thank the sponsor for this video, me and my Patreon page, where you can get your name credited on screen too. Check it out in the link in the description below. Hit the like button, leave a comment, install an ad block, most importantly subscribe and share this video with a friend. Hit the notification bell and do all those things the algorithm loves. If you agree or disagree with any of my points, or if you want to see me do a video on another subject, let me know and I will see you next time. Apparently, when it is very hot, my voice becomes croaky.